Everybody knows that illegal drugs are big business. Even though vast resources have been thrown at the problem over the last several decades, criminal drug running operations continue to flourish, and drug lord is still among the most profitable occupations in the world. While law enforcement has made every effort to stem the tide, there's no accounting for the creativity and fearlessness of drug runners. These are some of the craziest and most unexpected ways drugs have ever been smuggled, and for every one of them, there's probably a dozen we just haven't heard about yet. When notorious Mexican drug kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera escaped from his prison cell in July 2015, officials must have been kicking themselves into next week because they couldn't have been too surprised. El Chapo escaped via a mile-long tunnel, complete with electric lighting, ventilation, and a modified motorcycle track that terminated directly underneath his cell. It was estimated to have cost around $50 million, and while this may seem like a needlessly elaborate escape plan, the Mexican drug cartels have had plenty of practice with this type of construction. According to U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, over 80 of these super tunnels have been discovered on the U.S. side of the border in just the last 10 years. The cartels seemingly employ a stable of engineers, logistics experts, and construction professionals, as it seems unlikely that your average cartel lieutenant would have the know-how to pull off even one such project, let alone dozens. Tunnels like these account for untold amounts of drugs, firearms, and cash crossing the border every year. The recent discovery of one tunnel linking warehouses in Tijuana and San Diego resulted in the seizure of 17,000 pounds of marijuana and 325 pounds of cocaine, with a street value in the tens of millions. Another ingenious method of moving single multi-million-dollar shipments has recently come to the attention of authorities. While the Amazon River has long been used to move illicit goods, smugglers have begun taking a comparably high-tech approach to this avenue. Engineers design fully submersible submarines, then fabricate the individual pieces under cover of the rainforest canopy. The fabricated pieces are floated down the river to a waiting construction crew, who assemble the crude but effective craft and hand it off to the smugglers. Although they can cost upwards of $1 million, these vessels are considered disposable. If a smuggling crew happens to be intercepted by the Coast Guard, a crew member will activate a lever that floods the sub and dumps its cargo, leaving the crew treading water, waiting to be nabbed by authorities. After all, the occasional $1 million loss doesn't sting very much when you're moving tens of millions worth of illegal cargo daily. In January 2015, Tijuana police checked out a drone that had crashed at the US-Mexico border. They discovered that it was loaded down with 6 pounds of crystal meth. And while it was the first time authorities would intercept a drug-laden drone bound for the US, it would be far from the last. 7 months later, 2 men were caught on Border Patrol security cameras retrieving a package from a drone that had crossed the US border near Calexico. Once apprehended, they were found to be in possession of a whopping 28 pounds of heroin, which illustrates a slight kink in the drone strategy. While using drones as mules may appear to mitigate the risk of getting caught, somebody still has to physically handle the drugs eventually. Authorities have also begun using their own drones to patrol borders and monitor smuggling activity, as drone mules have only increased in prevalence over the last couple years. Some drug lords have even commissioned custom drones from cartel engineers, capable of carrying more weight and flying higher or faster. Wars of the future may be fought entirely with robots, but it's the drug war that they've been roped into first. Aside from drugs, one of Mexico's main legitimate exports is fresh produce. Agricultural products accounted for $21 billion in goods exported to the US in 2016, and it stands to reason that drug smugglers would have their eyes on legitimate trade for possible avenues to transport their wares. Perhaps inevitably, the cartels have taken to stashing drugs, usually marijuana, inside fake produce, packaging it along with real produce in an attempt to get it across the border. In January 2016, customs officials tagged a produce truck for secondary inspection at the border. What appeared to be routine quickly turned into a major bust, as an incredible 2,500 pounds of pot was found stashed inside fake carrots, which were bundled right along with the real deal. Just over a year later, a staggering 4,000 pounds of marijuana was extracted from hundreds of fake limes in a similar situation. Non-invasive imaging equipment, along with drug canines, were used to ferret out the stash. One can only wonder how many shipments like these have slipped by undetected, because there's simply no way to be sure. The next time you're shopping, you may just want to give that lime a little extra squeeze to make sure that nothing unexpected made it into the produce section. If finding weed in a bunch of innocent-looking fruit seems surprising, imagine finding a bunch of cocaine along with some harmless-looking donuts. That's the situation Bogota, Colombia police found themselves in when they stopped a young woman at the Bogota airport. Inside her innocuous box of donuts was a packet containing almost 1,000 grams of cocaine, a pretty big haul. But some smugglers have gotten even more devious with foodstuffs. In one instance, Mexican soldiers confiscated a shipment of boxes of pastry that were actually sprinkled with cocaine instead of powdered sugar. Danish-style pastries have also been intercepted that were injected with a methamphetamine paste instead of cream cheese. Perhaps it's because the humble pastry is so seemingly innocent that drug runners employ this method, but authorities are catching on. So far, these types of busts have only occurred within South America. There have been no confirmed cases of drug-laden pastries reaching the US as of yet. In July 2016, a Queens, New York seafood importer found himself in deep trouble when authorities received information about a shipment of frozen fish that was arriving at Miami International Airport. Agents seized the shipment, then spent all day filleting fish after fish, eventually extracting 20 kilos of cocaine from inside their frozen carcasses. After collecting all the drugs, agents replaced the fish in their boxes and allowed the shipment to be delivered to the importer, which was under surveillance. They then promptly busted the two men tasked with retrieving it, adding to a mountain of trouble for the unidentified importer, who was already under investigation for his possible involvement in an 82-pound shipment of cocaine which had been seized at the airport months earlier. Apparently, the importer of fine seafood and drugs had decided to resort to more tricky means to conceal his side business, but federal drug agents can be even trickier. He'll have plenty of time to concoct an even more ingenious scheme while he's serving time in prison. Jamaican Herman Anthony Spence was a barman on a Princess Cruise Line ship, and he had his own bright idea of getting around customs officials while in possession of a ridiculous amount of cocaine. He was detained on entry to the UK, and officials found 2 packages of the drug underneath the athletic trainer soles in his shoes, along with 2 more packages which were simply stuffed into his backpack. The haul had an estimated street value of over 430,000 pounds, more than $500,000 US. Others have attempted to move cocaine using similar methods. In 2011, a passenger on a commercial airline was arrested after 4 pairs of shoes in his luggage were found to have nearly 4.5 pounds of coke sewn inside the insoles. Officials only made the bust because the man had a few vague responses to questions about his travel activities, and one agent noticed that there was some new stitching inside the old pair of shoes. In this case, nearly $250,000 worth of the white stuff was confiscated. In 2016, 74-year-old Florida resident Ralph Soules was released after a 13-month stay in jail for narcotics trafficking. Having lost his home and facing a tough road to restart his life, he figured he had nothing to lose telling his story to the press, and it's a story that illustrates the devious lengths to which drug smugglers will go. Mr. Soules was contacted through email by a potential investor in his company, eventually befriending the man and flying off to South Africa for a meeting. Upon arrival, he was told that the man had been called away to Fiji, and Mr. Soules was asked to meet him there and bring along a mysterious suitcase which appeared to contain nothing but clothes. Of course, concealed within the bag was a stash of drugs, and Mr. Soules had become an unwitting accomplice to drug smuggling. This con has become more and more prevalent in recent years, with elderly marks being duped into transporting such harmless items as candy, tea, and soap, only to find themselves jailed when their cargo turns out to not be so harmless. According to US officials, more than 30 elderly United States citizens are currently behind bars overseas after having gotten caught up in just such a scam. In 2011, a Peruvian man was detained at an airport in Argentina, attempting to board a flight to South Africa. In his luggage was a heavy box of metal bolts, complete with nuts already screwed onto them. Something about the package aroused suspicion, and upon examining it with a special scanner, the bolts were found to be hollowed out. You may be able to guess what happened next. The hollow bolts were packed to the brim with an amazing 45 pounds of cocaine, and the man was arrested before he could board his flight. While it can't be known just how many times this ploy has been used successfully, it seems safe to say that this couldn't have been the first time it's been attempted. It seems that as long as there are legitimate, innocent goods crossing borders, drug traffickers will keep finding ways to stuff drugs inside them. Then again, there are times when a more direct approach is favored. When all other avenues of transport are deemed too risky, drug runners can take a gamble by simply flinging the drugs as far over the border as they possibly can. And if you have the right tools, it turns out that you can get quite a bit of air under a bundle of narcotics. In early 2017, customs officials discovered a working catapult mounted to the top of the border wall near the Douglas port of entry. The catapult had enough power to launch nearly 100 pounds of marijuana clear over the border and into the US, a bundle which authorities discovered after two men they approached at the wall ran away. While this seems like a rather cartoonish approach to drug smuggling, it could be argued that with all the bizarre and unexpected methods that smugglers have used to conceal their goods, brazenly flinging a shipment over the border with a catapult might just be crazy enough to work.